Zanac is one of those games that I kept coming back to on and off over the years. When I first started playing it over a decade ago, I couldn't get past the first stage. I had no knowledge of the mechanics outside of grabbing the special weapon pickups. But as I started doing 1cc's and getting better at shmups in general, I would come back to this one and usually get a little bit better each time. After clearing Gun Frontier, I decided to come back to it yet again, and this time I finally got my clear. So in this video, I want to give my top tips for beating this game without continuing to do it well. I want to get started by talking about the special weapon pickups that go along with your main shot, particularly the best ones. These are actually more important than your main shot. The best offensive weapon by far is special weapon number 7, also known as high speed. The firing rate is fantastic, you get plenty of ammunition per pickup, so it takes a while for it to run out. Plus, it chews through enemy bullets in order to take out enemies better and provide a level of protection. Whenever you go left or right while shooting it, the shot leans in that direction as well, giving you plenty of screen coverage. And that's just the first time you pick up high speed at the lowest level. It gets even more powerful the more of them you stack, and eventually, the shot becomes a huge disc, giving you a ridiculous amount of screen coverage even when shooting straight ahead. You can stay mostly in the center when fully powered up with it and take out most of the enemies that spawn from the top left and right of the screen pretty well. It only takes 3 extra pickups to get to that point, so it doesn't even take that long to fully power it up. This is the one special weapon that most players focus on getting when trying for the 1cc. Unless there's a self-imposed challenge to use Special Weapon 0, the default one, which I'll talk about later. So if number 7 is the best offensive weapon, what is the best defensive one? Well, it's not the shield. The best defense is actually number 6, the Plasma Flash. This is the closest thing to a traditional bomb in the game. At first, it doesn't seem that great because its original form is quite slow and has to touch something in order to go off and clear the screen. It is also not so great for boss fights because it only clears stuff that's in the air and not the ground targets. But the thing is, once you grab 2 more of them to refill it, it starts going off instantly whenever you press the button, which is a big improvement. Then if you refill it 5 times, then the bomb becomes a single-use version of the lower level Plasma Flash, but it turns everything on screen into a blue lander, each of which will give you an extra life upon pickup. If you shoot these blue landers, they turn into red landers that not only give you extra lives, but also increase your rate of fire and give you auto fire in the process. This increased rate of fire makes boss fights easier, and you can easily gain 10 or more extra lives from both types of landers from this trick. However, the catch is that you can only do this 1 time during your run. Speaking of clearing the screen, if you don't have access to the special weapon number 6 pickups, you may be able to clear the screen by finding enemy erasers. If you find these on the ground, you need to shoot them in order to make them available, but once you do, you can then touch them and clear the screen of everything in the air. This can get the player out of a bind sometimes. Also, some of these turn into warps. In particular, the variations on the ground with smiley faces. However, Stage 7 actually has a backwards warp that you'll want to avoid unless you're trying to milk the game for score. The thing is, if you can keep the screen clear with the Plasma Flash or the enemy erasers, you can keep the rank chilled out for long stretches and stay alive. The only bad thing about them is that they also wipe out things that are good, like the power chips that are used to improve your main shot. But that's a small price to pay in order to keep the enemies under control. A big point that I want to make about the sub-weapon system in general is that it's not always about having the right one at any given point. Sometimes it's best to take what the game gives you in a particular moment, especially after dying. At the beginning of my runs, I usually grab the shield number 2 because there are plenty of pickups for it, and it works well for me until I can grab the Plasma Flash and start upgrading it. Even a weapon that I usually don't like, such as number 5, the Rewinder, can be handy, like in my last 1cc when I grabbed a couple of them after dying and it worked out pretty well in the moment. The Straight Crusher, number 1, is normally one of the worst weapons in most situations, especially at lower levels, but it came in handy for me one time to finish off the final boss because it goes through objects even in its weaker form. The Vibrator, which is the number 4 pickup, can also be useful in boss fights, but I usually think of it as more of a last resort most of the time. At least it doesn't affect the rank and doesn't take long to max out. By the way, don't always wait until your favorite pickups like number 6 or number 7 arrive to grab something. This is especially true if you're trying to recover after death. And of course, I can't go without talking about weapon number 0, the all-range weapon. This is your default special weapon that you always start with besides your main shot. Initially, it's pretty weak. However, you can upgrade it in order to make it wider, and eventually it can even cancel bullets. However, it's not that great against blocks and spongier enemies like the pieces of the bosses that you need to take out. Also, it can't go through anything either. But something that works in its favor is that it has unlimited ammunition. Another thing that's advantageous about it is that you can fire it in all 8 directions, even to the side or behind you. Some players really enjoy using this one actually for almost the entire run. As far as my least favorite pickup goes, in my opinion it's circular, which is number 3. I think that's the worst one. Some people like this one, but even when you have it powered up to, let's say, level 2, things always seem to get through the circle of balls and manage to kill you. It also jacks up the rank a bit, kinda like the shield does, while providing less protection in my opinion. You'd have to get this thing maxed out at level 4 for it to probably be useful, but I've never survived long enough to pull that off, and even then it still doesn't take out ground enemies. Number 4, that one I already talked about. The Vibrator is a very close second in terms of least useful pickups, but at least that one doesn't affect the rank. So far, I haven't talked much about the main shot, but there's a good reason for that. It's not as important as you might think it is. Don't get me wrong, you do want to power it up as much as you can. There's the old trick at the beginning of stage 1 where you ram into the middle block in the first set of them that appears in order to power your main shot up quickly by gaining a few levels right off the bat. You'll want to do that trick. However, it is not easy to get the maxed out super gun outside of certain ground pickups in a few of the stages, and if you're at a really low shot level prior to picking that up, you won't be able to keep your super gun anyway if you pick up a power chip after, which is something that I've done by mistake a lot. It's really easy to do. Otherwise, it takes 18 power chips while having the all-range weapon equipped the entire time in order to get it, which is a pain in the rear end. But once you get this main shot to level 4, which is the triple shot, you're honestly good to go for boss fights. It's going to do enough damage to get you by. Even level 2 or 3 is viable, especially if you have a special weapon like high speed. So what I'm saying is, don't panic if you can't keep your main shot at super gun levels. The spread is fantastic on the super gun, especially if you pair it with the maxed out high speed that I talked about earlier. But if you can't get it powered up fully, don't panic. I've never kept the super gun for long in my 1 credit clears for one reason or another. So now that I've discussed the weapons, we have to discuss how to approach these stages. This is not a game where you're gonna route heavily for the entire thing. You'll want to route a bit early on in order to do the extra lives trick with the plasma flash maxed out. However, the real key for beating the entire game is learning enemy behavior. This game is over an hour long from start to finish with 12 stages total. You're going to see many of the same enemies throughout the entire game. Also, the more of them you kill, the more of them that will spawn, especially when we're talking about the smaller stuff. There are some bigger enemies known as capital ships that start appearing in stage 2. And also you have the T-cells that appear in stages 8 and 11 only that can be kind of annoying. There are mini fortresses that appear throughout the stages as well that serve as mini bosses. The bigger fortresses at the end of the stage tend to function the same way. involving you taking out a fortress piece by piece while enemies spawn. These are the main boss fights of the game. However, you don't necessarily want to route heavily. You do need to react a bit to things, as there is RNG with the spawn points. If you see the enemy and know that it's going to go down the sides of the screen, or you know that the enemy is aiming bullets at you as it's going off screen, you should know how to react. And your ability to react properly will be tested a lot because the game is so long. Sure, the later stages do get more intense regardless of rank, which I'll discuss later, but you do get many chances to learn from your mistakes as well, as long as you're paying attention to enemy behavior. Just because you screw up on, let's say, stage 4, doesn't mean that you're not going to get another chance to get your reaction right in a similar situation in another stage. That's actually one small way the repetition actually works out in your favor over the course of a run. The next thing that I want to discuss is dying in this game. Unless you're a super player, you're bound to get hit by something and die at one point or another in a run. Probably quite a few times. But death is not a run killer in this game. One, this game gives you a lot of extends. You can get one at the very beginning of your run by taking out the SART, the little recon ship that flies down the screen on either side at the start of stage 1 with your all-range weapon. That will turn into a lander that'll give you an extend once you grab it. You can even shoot it and turn it into a red lander and increase your rate of fire. You'll get your first scoring extend at 20,000 points, and your next one is at 80,000. After that, you get scoring extends every 80,000 points. Don't forget about the trick with the max out plasma flash that I talked about earlier, that you can do once in a run in order to cancel just about anything on screen into landers to give 1-ups. You can get up to over 20 lives easily before the start of stage 4. Another reason why death isn't so bad is there's always a power chip, a special weapon pickup, or an enemy eraser coming up soon. You will not go long periods of time without any pickups at all. And the last reason is that dying lowers the rank, which I'm about to get to pretty soon near the end of this video. But if you remember these things as well as the other things I've talked about earlier in this video, you can avoid a lot of deaths and get to the end. The last thing that I want to talk about is the rank system, which is one of the things that this game is especially known for. Strategy Wiki has an excellent breakdown of the rank system, and basically, rank goes up based on how long you stay alive, whether you pick up the shield or circular pickups, because those two special weapons jack up the rank, destroying lots of enemies in an aggressive manner, especially the more powerful your weapons are, and also if you fail to take out the fortresses fast enough. Rank decreases whenever you die, whenever you use a plasma flash or enemy eraser, slowing down your rate of fire long enough, taking out a fortress on time, and taking out a SART. Now the truth is, rank is not as big of a threat as you might think it is. For one, if you're spamming the plasma flash all the time, which is a great survival strategy, you're keeping the screen free of enemies and keeping the rank down in the process. Also, if you have special weapon number 7, high speed, maxed out, you have a ton of screen coverage and can not just take out a lot of enemies, but also cancel bullets in front of you as well. The truth is, this is not Battle Garega or Gun Frontier or a 90s Konami shmup for that matter. Suiciding is mostly pointless because you lose all of your power upon dying. The only time you'll want to suicide is if you powered down after dying and you're trying to take out the last pieces of a fortress and you're willing to take a risk and get really close to the last pieces even if they're gonna shoot you. Also, rank doesn't carry over quite as much from stage to stage because you can lower the rank at the end of any stage by finishing off that fortress on time. You don't need to avoid upgrades to the main shot, and outside of maybe special weapons 2 and 3, you don't need to avoid special weapons either. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You want to use special weapons number 6 and 7 a lot. Switch between them if you have to. Those are the best ones for keeping the screen clear, which is the key to success, besides knowing enemy behavior. Extends are plentiful, so dying a few times here and there just isn't a big deal despite the power loss, so don't worry about that. Plus, it even lowers the rank. Learn the ways the enemies attack, use the right special weapons, get a bunch of extends, and you'll probably be fine. But at the end of the day, Zanac is a game that has a reputation for difficulty, but some of that is a little bit overblown. It's certainly not a beginner shmup, but it's far from being among the most difficult games in the genre either. It's a middle tier shmup at best in terms of challenge. You have more than enough resources to get the job done and some of the weapons border on broken. The game does get a bit aggressive at times, but it's nothing that the player can't handle with the right approach and a little bit of practice. And now I want to hear from you. What do you think of this game? Are you a fan of it? Or do you find it aggravating? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again soon.